The shuttle descended through a storm of pale mist, its hull creaking as if the atmosphere itself resisted entry. From the viewport, the ocean stretched endlessly below, not blue but silver, metallic, unbroken, and eerily still. It reflected no clouds, no sunlight, nothing of the world above. Only when lightning struck did it shimmer, and in that brief flash, he thought he saw something move beneath the surface, too vast, too deliberate to be a wave. The NAV console flickered. Magnetic interference detected. The ship's AI repeated the warning in a flat tone that somehow made it worse. He muted it and focused on the landing coordinates flashing on the screen, latitude 0.01 south. Longitude 128.34 west. The location matched the will, the inheritance, the lighthouse that was now his. The structure appeared through the fog like a monolith emerging from memory. Towering, skeletal, and covered in black algae that glowed faintly when touched by light. It stood at the edge of a cliff that plunged straight into the strange metallic ocean, its base fused into the rock as though grown there, not built. As he stepped out into the cold air, the first thing he noticed was the sound, or rather, the lack of it. No waves. No wind. Only the hum of the tower itself, low and constant, like a pulse deep underground. He found the door already open. Inside, the air was warm, heavy with the scent of ozone and rust. The walls weren't stone or steel, but something in between, a seamless surface that seemed to shift when not directly looked at. The interior machinery was ancient, predating any known human tech. The beacon core at the top, visible through the vertical shaft that ran up the center, was still active. It emitted faint radiation, a wavelength he couldn't classify. He dropped his pack beside the old console and wiped the dust from the control surface. To his surprise, it powered on. A faded emblem appeared. Not from the current colonial directorate, but from the old expansion era. He recognized the symbol from historical records, 3 concentric circles around a single point. The mark of the Architects of Dawn, a group that vanished before recorded galactic time began. The realization sent a tremor through him. The tower was far older than the colony. He walked the spiral stairs until he reached the lowest level, where the air thickened and the hum grew louder. There, he found it, the door. Circular, metallic, sealed by massive chains fused with crystalline growths. Strange symbols pulsed faintly along the edges, shifting like living circuitry. He reached out, not touching, just close enough to feel the energy radiating from it. It wasn't electricity. It was something older, something that made the hairs on his arms rise as though his body recognized it before his mind could. The chains were cold, impossibly heavy. When he placed his palm on one of them, it vibrated, a sound too deep for the ears, felt only in the bones. He withdrew quickly. His reflection in the door's surface lingered a moment too long, eyes glimmering faintly before fading. He took a step back. The hum didn't stop. He set up camp on the upper level that night, using what remained of the previous keeper's quarters. The bed had been untouched for decades, perhaps centuries. Dust gathered in ripples along the floor, disturbed only by the soft vibration of the tower. He lit a small lamp, though the walls themselves seemed to glow faintly when darkness settled. Through the glass window, the metallic sea stretched into forever, and in its reflection, the lighthouse's beam rotated slowly, though he hadn't powered it. The console below had come alive again on its own, emitting brief bursts of static. He found a recording among the archived files, dated 270 years prior. The audio was broken, corrupted, but one fragment remained: keep the door sealed. It's not the ocean outside you should fear, it's the one beneath. Then silence. That night, he dreamed of the sea. In his dream, it wasn't still but breathing, inhaling and exhaling with the rhythm of his heart. Each wave carried voices that spoke in reversed echoes, names that meant nothing to him and yet made him ache as though he'd forgotten something vital. When he woke, the lamp had gone out. Only the faint glow of the walls remained, pulsing in slow rhythm with the hum below. He rose, uneasy, and walked to the lower chamber again. The air felt denser, heavier, as if the tower itself exhaled around him. The door was unchanged, but the chains were no longer cold. They radiated faint warmth, and the faint light of the symbols had intensified, blue-white veins running across the metal surface. He stood before it for a long moment, his breath forming clouds in the chill air. Then, against reason, against training, he lifted his hand and knocked once. The sound echoed through the tower, soft but impossibly deep, spreading through the walls and down into the stone. It was like knocking on the planet itself. He waited, hand still against the metal. A long silence followed, filled only by the faint hum. He started to turn away, then it came. A single knock, perfectly timed, perfectly mirrored, from the other side. Every light in the tower flickered. The air pressure dropped. The hum grew louder, almost a heartbeat now. He stumbled back, eyes fixed on the sealed door. The chains pulsed once more, and the symbols aligned into a pattern, 3 circles around a single point. The same mark from the architects of dawn. Then, as quickly as it began, everything went still. The tower returned to silence. The glow faded. He stood there for what felt like an hour, waiting, listening. Nothing more came. Only the sound of his own heartbeat, out of sync with the hum below. He turned off his lamp and climbed back to the upper level, but the silence no longer felt like peace. It felt like waiting, as though the entire ocean outside was holding its breath, listening to him in return. He woke to a world muted and unfamiliar. The metallic ocean outside no longer reflected the storm, only a dull, gray sheen, and the lighthouse itself seemed to breathe beneath him. Every surface vibrated faintly, as if carrying a message he could not yet decode. He descended the spiral stairs to the lower chamber, the air thick with ionized particles that tingled on his skin. The door was unchanged, yet he knew it had heard him. The chains had slackened imperceptibly, and the symbols along the metal surface flickered in sequences that defied pattern, some vanishing entirely, others burning brighter than before. He set up the instruments he had brought, spectrometers, resonance scanners, graviton detectors, but every tool failed. The spectrometer displayed colors that did not exist in any human spectrum. The resonance scanner picked up frequencies that seemed alive, moving in deliberate arcs rather than chaotic noise. He noted the anomalies, writing them in the log with a hand that trembled despite his attempts to steady it. Something in the door responded to observation itself, as though conscious, shifting subtly whenever he wasn't looking directly at it. Days passed, though he could not measure them accurately. Time seemed compressed here. His memories of leaving the shuttle overlapped with recollections of worlds he had never seen, histories he had never lived. The ocean, he realized, was not water. Its surface moved against gravity at times, forming spirals, bulges, and depressions without wind or tide. When lightning split the sky, it revealed structures below, monolithic towers, spiraling like neurons, glowing faintly, as though the planet beneath the sea had its own consciousness. He returned to the door again, compelled by a mixture of fear and fascination. The hum had changed. No longer a simple resonance, but a voice that pressed against his mind in syllables and pulses. He hesitated, then knocked once more. This time, the response was immediate, sharper, resonant in a way that seemed to bypass the walls and reach straight into his nervous system. He could feel it, a tapping that was at once separate from and part of him. The knock was deliberate, intelligent, and it carried a weight he could not comprehend. He spent the following night in the observation deck, staring at the ocean. Each wave seemed to ripple with thought, reflections forming faces that weren't his own, voices that whispered names he did not recognize yet felt intimately familiar. He tried to call them out, but his voice was swallowed by the hum of the tower. Instruments on the deck began to fail. Screens displayed fragmented star maps, showing constellations that did not exist in known human space, and occasional flashes revealed not light but memories, brief loops of time from distant colonies and forgotten cities. In the records he found beneath the lighthouse, one document stood out, a log from the first keeper, written in a language half mathematical, half pictorial. It described the ocean as a memory substrate, a medium capable of storing thought, history, and consciousness in liquid form. The entries spoke of beings called the Architects of Dawn, who had seeded planets like Erebus, 9 with these oceans to preserve knowledge after civilizations fell. Humanity, it seemed, had discovered this once and then abandoned it, unable to comprehend the power they had stumbled upon. The lighthouse had been a lock, a sentinel, a guardian. He experimented cautiously. Using a small probe, he tapped it against the surface of the door, then recorded the vibration. The data was incomprehensible, a pattern that repeated yet never repeated the same way twice. When he replayed it, the ocean outside responded. Ripples formed in synchronization with the frequencies, reflecting structures that seemed to float above the water. It was a conversation of sorts, but in a language not of sound or sight, but of resonance and memory. By the fourth night, the dreams became more vivid. He saw the lighthouse mirrored beneath the ocean, a labyrinth of glass and metal spiraling into infinite depths. He walked its halls, passing forms that were at once alien and human, their faces etched with recognition. They whispered secrets in a language he could feel, describing epochs before human history, the rise and fall of distant civilizations, and the construction of oceans as living archives. He woke trembling, the memory of their eyes still on him. The air in the lighthouse thickened with phosphorescent mist that gathered around him like sentient smoke. The hum of the door grew insistent, pulsing faster, matching his heart. At one point, he dared to place his palm flat against the metal. Immediately, memories not his own flooded his mind, voyages across uncharted stars, interactions with beings whose forms defied matter, events that shaped the ocean itself. He stumbled back, nearly collapsing, overwhelmed by the influx. It was clear now, the door was not just a seal. It was a bridge, a medium through which the ocean could communicate, and perhaps even remember. He returned to the observation deck at dawn, watching as the metallic waves stretched farther than the eye could see, bending light and gravity in subtle, impossible ways. Faces appeared briefly on the surface, human and alien, some pleading, some observing, all connected in a tapestry of thought. And then, from deep below, a sound, or perhaps a pulse, reverberated through the cliffs, through the lighthouse, through him. A single knock, mirrored perfectly from the night before, but this time multiplied. The ocean, the door, the tower, all of it responding as if alive, as if it had been waiting for him to truly listen. He realized he was no longer merely an inheritor of a lighthouse. He was a participant in something vast, a consciousness that spanned the metallic sea, the lighthouse, and perhaps the memories of every being who had ever looked upon it. And as he stood there, bathed in the strange dawn of Erebus, 9, he understood that curiosity had opened a door that no human was meant to close again. The ocean changed first. It rose without wind, a slow swell that defied gravity, forming spirals and arcs that hung suspended above the metallic surface. Each movement was deliberate, precise, as if the water itself were alive and thinking. He watched from the lighthouse window, mesmerized and horrified, realizing that the ocean was not merely reflective, not merely liquid, it was a medium of consciousness, a repository of thought and memory that had accumulated for eons. The faces he had glimpsed before now multiplied, not floating randomly, but arranged in patterns, shifting like constellations, blinking in and out with the rhythm of a heartbeat he could feel through the floorboards. The door below pulsed in synchrony with the ocean. The symbols along its circumference had begun to form coherent patterns, geometry he could almost decipher, lines and curves that suggested language, yet language in a dimension he had no name for. Compelled by curiosity he could no longer resist, he descended once again, each step echoing in the hollow metal stairwell, vibrating faintly with the resonance of the planet itself. As he reached the door, the hum intensified, vibrating through his body, resonating with his bones in a way that made thought itself slippery, fluid, uncertain. He reached out to touch it, fingers trembling. The moment his skin made contact with the metal, visions exploded behind his eyes. He saw the construction of the lighthouse, not as it existed now, but as it was built centuries, perhaps millennia, ago. Hands that were not entirely human assembled the beacon, weaving circuits into the metal as if stitching thought into matter. He saw oceans being seeded on barren worlds, shimmering pools that glimmered with nascent memories, conscious from the instant they touched the soil. And beneath every ocean, he glimpsed the same circular doors, sealed and humming, waiting. He gasped, staggered backward, but the visions continued, spilling into him like a torrent. He saw humanity attempting to colonize distant worlds, discovering these oceans, and then recoiling in fear. Efforts to harness or contain them failed repeatedly. The archives had told him fragments, but here, with the resonance coursing through his mind, he understood the truth. These oceans remembered everything. They remembered civilizations that had never been recorded, mistakes erased from history, memories deliberately buried, and they could recall, fully, anyone who approached. The door was not a barrier, it was a handshake, an invitation, and a warning. The ocean pulsed again, forming a towering spiral above the cliffs. It bent light and gravity, revealing glimpses of structures beneath the waves. They were immense, shaped like neurons, tentacles of memory that reached into the planet's core. He realized with growing awe that these were not buildings but thoughts made solid, crystallized consciousness spanning entire worlds. Every flicker, every pulse, seemed to communicate a message, though one he could not yet translate. And yet, in the patterns of movement, in the rhythm of the hum, he sensed intent, purpose. The ocean was aware of him. It was acknowledging him. He experimented. Small taps on the door, recorded with instruments that functioned only partially, elicited responses from the ocean. Each knock sent ripples through the metallic water, revealing visions of lost colonies, of beings who had perished long before their names were recorded. Some images were horrifying, civilizations consumed by their own memories, trapped in oceans that grew too dense with thought. Others were magnificent, cities of light and liquid, entire worlds preserved in crystalline clarity beneath the waves. Every response left him drained yet hungrier for understanding. Nights merged into days, indistinguishable in the shifting light of Erebus. 9. The tower itself seemed to grow older and younger simultaneously, its surfaces bending subtly as if replaying centuries of energy. The lamp he had lit no longer illuminated, it was irrelevant here. Light came from the walls, pulsing in synchronization with the hum, with the ocean, with his heartbeat. In the faint reflections, he saw himself not as he was, but as he might have been in countless alternate histories, an explorer, a soldier, a scholar, and a wanderer of worlds erased before they began. The dreams returned, stronger, impossibly vivid. In them, he walked through the lighthouse as it existed beneath the ocean, a mirror labyrinth of glass, metal, and memory. Beings of unfamiliar geometry moved silently alongside him, their faces fleeting and mutable, whispering in languages that bypassed ears and entered directly into thought. They described the ocean as a rememberer, an entity that fed on experience, catalogued consciousness, and sometimes, rarely, spoke through those who approached the sealed doors. He awoke trembling, unable to tell if he had left the lighthouse in his sleep or merely traversed another layer of the ocean's mind. By the fifth night, the door responded without being touched. Pulses of light raced along its surface in sequences he could almost anticipate. He understood, finally, that it was testing him, evaluating his capacity to comprehend, to remember, to endure. The ocean outside mirrored the pulses, forming vast, intricate patterns that stretched from horizon to horizon. Within them, he glimpsed glimpses of the architects of dawn, of beings whose forms were impossible to describe, guiding humanity's first attempts to understand memory as substance. They had been patient, meticulous, leaving traces, allowing only the worthy, or the desperate, to uncover the truth. He approached the door once more, hand hovering over the metal. The hum intensified, aligning with his heartbeat in a synchronous rhythm that made thought itself feel tangible, fluid, malleable. Then, as if acknowledging him, the door responded, not with sound, but with a force that pressed into his consciousness, a singular thought made presence. Do you remember? The question carried weight beyond words, demanding knowledge he did not yet possess, yet instinctively recognized. The ocean shivered. The lighthouse vibrated. And in that instant, he realized that humanity's perception of the universe, the stars, the oceans, time itself, was incomplete. Beneath the waves, within the memory of the liquid world, a story awaited him. One that had always existed, patiently observing, waiting for someone to knock and listen. He understood then that knocking had opened not just a door, but a corridor into consciousness itself, and the ocean was beginning to speak. He found the records buried beneath the lighthouse in a metal box fused to the floor, coated in centuries of dust and phosphorescent lichen. The pages were fragile, written in a script that wavered between geometric symbols and archaic letters, as if the author had tried to capture both thought and sound in a single stroke. The first keeper's notes detailed the same phenomena he had experienced: the humming door, the pulsing ocean, the visions of worlds and civilizations that should have never existed. But the last entries chilled him. They spoke of the danger, of the ocean's capacity to remember too much, to overwhelm anyone who approached without respect or understanding. The final words were scrawled, frantic: if you answer it, it remembers you. And if it remembers fully, you are no longer yours alone. He descended to the lower chamber once more, the air heavy with ionized mist, the metallic sea outside now rippling in hypnotic patterns. The door seemed to watch him, pulsing with light that mirrored the rhythm of his heartbeat. He had become attuned to it, sensing subtle shifts in its resonance as though it were alive. He dared to touch the chains again, this time with the intention of listening rather than probing. The vibrations coursed into his arm, through bone and nerve, and he felt memories, not his own, flowing into him. Civilizations long erased from history, architects of worlds and oceans, and individuals whose lives had been recorded here in painstaking detail. The visions were dizzying, disorienting. He saw a world where the first lighthouses were built by beings who existed simultaneously as thought and matter, their consciousness dispersed across oceans of liquid memory. He witnessed humanity discovering these reservoirs, first in awe and then in fear, realizing that the oceans could recall every action, every choice, every failure. Entire societies had been obliterated not by war, but by the memory of themselves. He felt their terror, their awe, their reverence, and their mistakes as though they were his own. As he withdrew, gasping, the air in the chamber shifted. The hum of the door intensified into a complex harmony, layered with rhythms that resembled speech, music, and thought simultaneously. The ocean responded in kind, waves bending and twisting in impossible geometries, reflecting not the sky but landscapes and cities beneath the surface, illuminated from within. Each pulse seemed to communicate intention, as if the ocean and the door were negotiating, not with words, but with resonance and memory. He understood that the lighthouse itself was an intermediary, a bridge between human perception and the ocean's consciousness. He experimented cautiously. Placing a hand flat against the metal, he allowed the flow of memory to pass through him, observing without trying to control it. Images unfolded, the previous keeper navigating the labyrinth beneath the ocean, beings of alien geometry guiding humanity's understanding of memory as substance, and glimpses of the very fabric of Erebus IX's ocean, shaped like neurons, branching and reconnecting in endless patterns. He realized with growing awe that the door was not just a seal but a keyhole, and he was glimpsing the mechanism through which the ocean communicated its knowledge. The nights grew longer, indistinguishable from days, as he delved deeper into the door's memory. Dreams bled into waking reality, visions overlaying the physical space of the lighthouse. He saw himself in alternate iterations, walking cities submerged beneath oceans of liquid thought, conversing with beings whose forms defied physics, navigating timelines that coexisted rather than progressed. He felt the weight of knowledge pressing on him, the ocean remembering him as fully as he remembered it. And with each revelation came a subtle shift in his own consciousness. He could no longer separate his memories from the ocean's archives, nor his identity from the collective histories recorded beneath the waves. The door pulsed again, a steady rhythm now, almost deliberate. He placed both hands on it, surrendering fully to the flow. The chain's coldness vanished, replaced by warmth and a gentle pressure, as if it recognized him as an interlocutor rather than an intruder. Memories surged in waves. The construction of the lighthouse by beings both human and alien, the formation of the first oceans of liquid memory, and the design of the doors themselves as safeguards against humanity's curiosity. He glimpsed failures, keepers who had been overwhelmed, their consciousness absorbed into the ocean, preserved but no longer autonomous. And he felt the door weighing him against that history, testing him. He began to understand that the ocean did not merely store memory, it reacted to awareness. Every knock, every touch, every glance initiated a response. The lighthouse was both guardian and translator, converting the ocean's consciousness into forms perceivable to human senses. And now, it had chosen to share more than warnings or echoes. It began to teach. Patterns in the mist aligned, forming maps of time and space, equations of thought made visible. The ocean's memory was not linear, it was a web, a lattice of cause and effect, of action and reflection, linking distant worlds, long-extinct civilizations, and lives yet to be lived. He sat against the wall, overwhelmed, yet resolute. To leave now would be to abandon the chance to understand the ocean's purpose, to witness the architecture of consciousness itself. He realized that the previous keeper's warnings were true, to answer the door was to enter fully into the ocean's memory. And yet, the choice had been made for him the night he first knocked. The door had remembered him, and in return, it demanded recognition. The pulse of the lighthouse, the rhythm of the chains, the oscillating patterns of the metallic sea, all converged into a single, undeniable truth: he was no longer merely a visitor. He was a participant in a consciousness older, wider, and more intricate than humanity had ever imagined. The ocean outside shifted again, forming shapes of impossible clarity. Cities of liquid memory rose above the waves, spiraling like neurons into the sky. Within each structure, he glimpsed the architects of dawn guiding, observing, waiting. The lighthouse vibrated in resonance with the ocean, a heartbeat made tangible, a bridge between human perception and the living memory beneath. And as he placed his hands once more on the door, surrendering fully, the pulse changed, as if acknowledging that he had understood. The hum became a voice, not in words, but in recognition, a greeting that spoke directly to the part of him that could comprehend the infinite. He realized then that the ocean was not merely alive. It remembered everything it had seen, and now, it had begun to remember him. The ocean stirred as if awakening from an immeasurable slumber. Waves no longer moved with the predictability of water, they twisted and coiled, forming towers, spirals, and patterns that hovered above the metallic surface. Each motion seemed deliberate, intelligent, as if the liquid itself were assessing him, cataloging him, testing the boundaries of his understanding. From the observation deck, he could see glimpses of structures beneath the waves, towers, bridges, even entire cities, glowing faintly in crystalline light, suspended in a medium that was neither fully liquid nor solid, a fluid memory of civilizations long forgotten. The door below throbbed with its own resonance, pulsing in tandem with the ocean's rhythm. The symbols etched along its surface now formed shifting patterns of geometry that were almost communicative. He descended into the lower chamber, feeling the vibrations through the stairwell, a pulse that bypassed sound entirely and pressed into the marrow of his bones. Every step drew him deeper into a realm that was at once familiar and incomprehensible, a nexus where the lighthouse itself became less a building and more a conscious instrument of the ocean. He placed his hands on the door. This time, the flood of memories was not chaotic but structured, layered like strata in a geological formation. He felt the lives of the previous keepers interwoven with the architects who had built the oceans, the rise and fall of distant human colonies, and even moments from worlds he could not have reached. Each memory carried emotion, fear, curiosity, awe, and he felt them as tangibly as his own heartbeat. The ocean responded to his presence, not with sound but with pulses of recognition, each beat revealing more, deeper, older. He tried to understand the patterns, mapping them with his instruments, but they defied linearity. Time was not a line here but a lattice, every event echoing into multiple dimensions, converging and diverging simultaneously. One ripple in the water corresponded to centuries elsewhere, a shift in the hum aligned with events long past and futures yet to unfold. The ocean was not merely a repository, it was a network of consciousness, an archive that thought, remembered, and even learned. And it had chosen to focus on him. Visions became more vivid, overlaying his waking senses. He saw the lighthouse mirrored beneath the ocean, a labyrinth of glass, metal, and living light, its corridors filled with beings both alien and human, their forms shifting like reflections in fractured crystal. They did not speak, but communicated in thought forms that conveyed knowledge directly, bypassing language entirely. He witnessed the construction of entire worlds, seeded with oceans like this one, designed to preserve memory, consciousness, and history in a form that outlived matter itself. These were the architects of dawn, and he now walked in their shadows. The metallic sea outside bent light and gravity, forming spirals that extended beyond the horizon. Within these spirals, he glimpsed entire civilizations preserved in liquid memory, cities of crystalline structures, towers of thought, and corridors where consciousness moved freely, untethered by bodies. He could feel them observing him, gauging his understanding, weighing his intent. The lighthouse was the interface, the bridge through which human perception could access this vast archive. He understood that the ocean did not merely remember passively, it interacted, it tested, it shaped its own lessons. As night fell, the door responded without touch. Patterns of light raced along its surface, pulsating with increasing speed. He placed both hands against it and allowed the resonance to flow through him fully. Memories collided and intertwined, merging his own with those of keepers past, architects, and even entire civilizations that had been recorded here. He could feel the ocean extending into him, probing, learning, and recognizing. And then the knock came, not from him, but from within the resonance, a pulse that reverberated through the lighthouse, the cliffs, and the metallic ocean. A single, deliberate knock, perfectly mirrored in rhythm with his own heartbeat, demanding response. He hesitated, knowing instinctively that to answer fully was to step beyond human comprehension. Yet he did not hesitate long. He knocked back, the sound reverberating not as impact but as thought, a signal carried through the resonance of the door, the pulse of the lighthouse, and the consciousness of the ocean itself. Instantly, the water outside responded. Waves folded into spirals, revealing intricate cities below the surface. The air itself shimmered, and faint outlines of the architects of dawn appeared within the mist, guiding the flow of memory, observing the exchange. The ocean began to recede slightly, revealing vast canyons of liquid thought stretching into the planet's core. He felt the weight of it pressing against him, a sensation of standing inside the mind of a consciousness too vast to measure. Structures rose from the depths, neuron-like spires, networks of memory stretching across the ocean floor, alive with light and information. Each pulse of the door sent ripples through these formations, eliciting responses from forms older than humanity, yet intimately tied to human history. He stepped closer, feeling the pull of the ocean's memory into himself. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, terrifying. He glimpsed lives that had never existed, civilizations that had been erased, choices made and unmade. The resonance shaped thought itself, bending perception, expanding awareness. And yet, within this torrent of knowledge, he felt something else, a thread of intention, a focus. The ocean was not just recalling, it was teaching, guiding him, shaping his understanding of memory, consciousness, and the fabric of reality. The lighthouse pulsed in synchrony, its beam no longer outward but inward, shining into the depths, into the layers of consciousness, into him. The door, once a barrier, was now a conduit. He could feel the ocean's intelligence, vast and patient, acknowledging his presence, welcoming him into its network. And in that instant, he realized that the ocean's memory was not a passive archive, it was a living, responsive mind, and he had become a participant in its awakening. The knock had opened the floodgates. The ocean was now speaking, and he could no longer remain a mere observer. When he awoke, the metallic ocean was calm, but the calm was deceptive. The surface hung suspended in a mirror-like stillness, reflecting not sky or light but the lattice of memories he had glimpsed the night before. The lighthouse beneath him pulsed faintly, a heartbeat aligned with his own, yet larger, older, resonating with a rhythm that extended into the depths of the planet itself. He understood that the ocean was no longer passive, it had fully awakened, and he had become an integral part of its consciousness. He was both witness and participant, and the chain between human and memory had been irrevocably forged. Descending to the lower chamber, he placed his hands on the door one last time. It responded immediately, the patterns along its surface flowing into coherent forms, maps, equations, star charts, and histories interwoven into a tapestry of understanding. The ocean outside mirrored the door's pulse, rising and falling like lungs, revealing structures below, entire cities of memory, suspended in crystalline liquid, connected by networks of light that stretched to the planet's core. He realized that the lighthouse had never been a mere building. It was a node, a translator, and now, a bridge between the conscious ocean and human perception. He focused, sending a pulse back through the door. This time, it was not a knock but a signal of recognition, a greeting that transcended words. The ocean responded with a wave that flowed both upward and downward, spreading across the planet, carrying images of distant worlds, lost colonies, and civilizations humanity had thought long extinct. He glimpsed their histories, triumphs, failures, discoveries, mistakes, and for the first time, he understood the ocean's purpose. It was preservation, but not merely passive, it was active, shaping understanding, teaching, and curating memory across time and space. The hum of the lighthouse deepened, resonating through stone, metal, and air, aligning with the pulse of the ocean. He felt a thread of consciousness reach out through him, a pattern that wove together the previous keepers, the architects, and himself. The memories of those who had been absorbed, lost in the currents of the ocean, now coexisted alongside him, not as echoes but as integrated awareness. He understood the warning in the old records: to answer the door was to become part of the memory, yet he felt no fear now, only a sense of duty and clarity. Outside, the ocean began to flow again, its waves shimmering with embedded histories. The liquid lifted, revealing canyons, bridges, and spires of thought that stretched from surface to planetary core. Within these structures, he glimpsed beings of alien geometry moving with purpose, interacting with consciousness as naturally as breathing. They were not hostile, they were guides, remnants of the architects, shepherding memory through time and space. And now, they recognized him. The lighthouse had been the key, and he had passed the threshold into something both terrifying and magnificent. He walked the spiral stairwell, feeling the resonance of the entire ocean through the structure. Each step reinforced the connection, aligning him more fully with the consciousness beneath. He realized he could influence it, not control it, but interact, shaping the flow of knowledge, directing awareness in ways that could prevent the mistakes humanity had made on other worlds. The ocean did not forget, it could not be erased. But it could learn, and he had become its intermediary. He ascended to the observation deck, the metallic horizon stretched infinitely before him, the light of distant stars refracted through the memory-laden waters. He raised his hand and sent a final pulse to the ocean, a signal not of command but of understanding. The water shimmered, revealing glimpses of civilizations yet to arise, planets yet to be seeded, and the potential for knowledge to flow freely, preserved but not oppressive. The hum of the lighthouse softened, and the door below glowed faintly, the chains now mere ornaments rather than barriers. For the first time, the metallic ocean was silent, but it was a full silence, pregnant with consciousness, aware and awake. He realized he no longer needed to knock. The ocean knew him. He knew it. Humanity had feared what it did not understand, tried to bury it beneath time and waves, but now the ocean remembered, and he would ensure that memory would serve life rather than destruction. The lighthouse was no longer just inherited property, it was a living archive, a beacon, a bridge between the ephemeral and the eternal. As dawn spread across Erebus 9, the first light refracted through the metallic sea, illuminating structures beneath that had never seen the sun. The ocean rippled in recognition, and he felt a profound connection to every consciousness that had ever passed through it, including his own. He understood that the world would never forget again. Each wave, each shimmer of light, carried memory, history, and life itself. He stood alone on the observation deck, yet he was not alone. The lighthouse pulsed in resonance with the ocean, with the planet, with every being whose consciousness lingered here. The door beneath his feet hummed softly, waiting no longer for a knock. The ocean was awake, humanity remembered, and he had become the keeper, not of a building, but of memory itself. He exhaled, feeling the enormity of the responsibility, yet the clarity of purpose. The metallic horizon stretched endlessly, full of possibility, full of life, and for the first time, the ocean's vast, conscious silence felt like a gift rather than a warning. And somewhere deep below, the chains rested lightly, the door breathing softly, and the ocean waited, not in expectation, but in trust, as he began his work.